All right, let's kick it off. To begin with, thank you everybody for joining this and everybody coming to BSides, because like Derran threw out there earlier and asked the question of, hey, whose main role here is security? It shows everybody in this room and everybody who came to this event that security is top of mind for each and every one of you, as it should be, because it's not just keeping our organization's data secure, it's about keeping our individual data secure, because organizations hold on to our data because we provide it to them for services, and we need to come together to make sure that that is safe and secure, which...
So you thought this was a safe room by me asking that question, but I totally set him up to educate you that all of you are security people.
That's true, that's true. Anybody have one of these binders? Full of dust? Yeah? Ever used? Nice. It's one of the things we all have, or had, is that thing where they say there's a documented approach to a DR strategy, which typically means disaster recovery. And that binder itself is usually built for fires, floods, weather. Simple as that. That's what it's there for. That's what the plan is built for, but it hasn't been updated in quite some time. And being at Edmonton, we don't see a lot of natural disasters. Let's be honest, there is times where it occurs, but how often is a playbook like that broken out? Not a lot, and that's why it's covered in dust. And of course, I'm based in Edmonton. Being like a CISO is as simple as this. It's like being a goalie in Edmonton. You can save 99 shots, but you miss the one, and where do you end up? On the newspaper, fire him, get rid of him. He's useless.
Or Stuart.
And hey, there could be reasons to say maybe we do need better goalies in Edmonton. But it's the whole point of it's a team effort. It's not that one individual. There's many different lines of offense, defense. Of course, how do you win a game? Who has the most goals? But it really boils down, that's what's happening with even our security officers today. Even Qantas as an example. What happened there? The big thing happened. There was a big issue that occurred. The CISO is the one who took the blame for it. Is that really the case? Was it his fault? Maybe he's directly responsible for it, and that individual who should keep an eye on it, but it's an organizational problem. It takes direction from the top down. And this is where the world is changing, and it's not just about disaster recovery anymore. It's about cyber recovery. And that's where other things come into play except what we know as natural disasters. It's ransomware, extortion, exfiltration, right? This is the thing that everybody's having to face today. And what we're going to cover here today is what cyber resiliency really means. On top of that, why DR isn't enough. And I think I already covered off some of those pieces, but I'll get specific on it. Derran's going to go into some real stories. Of course, we're not going to say names. We're not going to do that, but we're going to talk about real incidents that happened based off of outcomes and playbooks that organizations were leveraging to keep their data resilience. Strategy, people, and process. We're not just technology. It's not what we are. We're all doing something with technology in most cases to drive a service, build up an organization, help our consumers and our clients. And then let's come together to build the standards that we need to implement going into the future. Now, I'm not going to read this off, but what is data resiliency? It's the simplest fact of how can you stop disruptions? How can you make sure your data is accessible to keep the business running and functioning? What it's not about data classification. It's not about the cleanliness of data. That's another part of the organization. But it comes together to make sure the main point is done, that you can recover from failures and outages, and also the malicious actors we see today. And as we unpack that, used to be if not, it's not if, but when. But really, it's about how bad can it be? And if we look at the left side, we're looking at actual disaster recovery. If we look at the right side, we're actually talking about cyber recovery. Natural disaster. With cyber recovery, it's a targeted attack in most cases. It doesn't mean it's targeted because you're a specific industry. It means it's targeted because they go after at least resistance. So that could mean you're using a piece of software that hasn't been updated in months, and they know that they can get in through that loophole. That's what they're going after. Where natural disasters, we know the outcome. It's as simple as that. If there's a fire, takes out your entire facility, you just need the other facility. Done. If it's a flood, well, you have a data center sitting in another location, you can power everything up. And that's where it goes into the recovery points. Latest backup, or with a recovery point for cyber recovery, it's unknown. Do you know what's actually clean? Well, that means you actually have to go through the process of figuring out where it got in, how it got in, what that impact is, recovery time. As close as possible to your latest restore point, pretty simple. But when we're actually talking about cyber recovery, it's longer due to risk of infection. And are you restoring the bad into your environment? Preparation, completely random for cyber recovery. Because you don't know what you don't know yet. Then, the main objective is to get everything back up and functioning when we're talking about disaster recovery. But when it comes to cyber recovery, it's the whole compromise, the accounts. What did they live off the land, and what did they already know about your organization? Do they know more than you even knew at this point? Maybe, maybe not, but you still got to figure that out. And the probability of disaster recovery, I kind of covered that already off in Edmonton. It's fairly low. Power outage, may be different, but I don't consider that a massive disaster recovery at that point in time. But when you're looking at cyber recovery, it's high. And that's not changing because there's money to be made. There's no money to be made in a natural disaster, but when somebody's chasing after funds to keep their organization running, I know they're criminals, but it's still an organization. They have quotas to meet. They need to make money to stay functioning. And that's where it boils into our Data Protection Trends Report from 2025, and this is Veeam, you can download it on the website, whatever. 69% of organizations paid a ransom and were attacked more than once. Did you ever answer a call from a telemarketer? Exactly.
How about CRA? Yeah. CRA.
You definitely need to answer calls from CRA.
Oh yeah, especially when they ask to pay them on credit cards, right? Or
100%.
gift cards.
I actually had to pay the CRA the other day. You can't even pay on credit card anymore. Do you know that? Or debit card. It has to be debit Visa. Technology, right? Took me forever to get into it too because of all the multi-factor authentication. Great. I like how that data is protected a little bit better now and that's coming into play. But the whole point is, if you answer the call from a telemarketer, you just hit a list. You're going to get another call because you answered, especially if you were friendly. They're going to call you back, especially if you bought something from them. They're going to call you back. If you ever buy a new car and you buy Sirius satellite radio, they're going to keep calling. They'll keep calling you anyways, but nonetheless. Now, the victimology in the industries. Does ransomware target a specific industry? Not really. Again, it's about that least resistance. And that's why this is just scattered. There's ones that get hit more than others. Don't get me wrong, but they're not, again, targeted. They're going after specific strands. They're going after specific vulnerabilities.
The balancing act, right?
100%.
If you think about it, they'd love to go after banks, but they know banks put probably the most money into their IT security, their resiliency. So where's that balancing act?
Yeah, and if they can get $2 million from one organization or another, doesn't matter. It's still $2 million. Nonetheless, they're still getting those funds. And as we look at the challenges of response and recovery, if you look at this timeline, the orange is where we are today. In some cases, as we start to look through this, and this is that whole concept that we all see, and here's your 4 major categories, whether that's detection, not defection. I think I made up a word. Is that even a word?
No. You
It's not, is it?
You
I
always make
do.
up good words.
I
in your
do.
presentation.
I'll have to come up with
So
what
good.
that word actually means later. But detection and analyzing everything that comes in. Then you get into containment, eradication, and recovery. But where we sit today, it's taking days and weeks to even get to the point that we found out what it is. We got to the point where we can at least look at containment. Then we're focusing on eradication, but we're still months away from recovery. The green dots is that sensible place we need to be. Sensible and defensible. That's a word.
It is a word. I was going to say, if you think about your organization you're in, how much time and effort and monies is put in those 3 top categories? versus recovery. We're always trying to get the newest security technology. We're always trying to, improve this or that, but really, prevention isn't 100%. We know that. Attacks are still occurring every day. I think that recovery stage is pretty important.
Yeah, 100%. And it is that whole fact of it's risk versus reward.
Yeah.
And I do go into organizations, even sometimes getting them to buy Veeam. And I look at the tool sets they have and I see where they sit and I'm like, well, you know what? I know I'm not supposed to say this, but maybe you don't even need to buy Veeam. Let's focus on the tool set you already have. I know that's not my job to tell you to look at my competitor that you have. My job is to displace that competitor, but I want them to be safe, secure, to keep my data that way. So leverage the tool set you have. If it doesn't meet what you need, now it's time to look around and see what else is out there. And that's where really the shift comes in. It's not about cybersecurity. It's time for us to turn the page as well. Set up that new expectation where it's cyber resilience. That's where we really want to be in the overall picture. And this is where Veeam's data resiliency maturity model comes into play. You might say, Rick, yeah, I'm sure that's architecture. You guys just came up with that, threw it in some AI bot and said, this DRMM sounds beautiful, and look how it all comes together. I'm sure somebody did something like that at marketing, but this is actually a survey that was built with McKinsey, or a study, I guess is the best way to say it, a study that was built with McKinsey, George Washington from MIT, as well as the likes of Microsoft, Splunk, Palo Alto. We all came together and we reached out to all organizations, not Veeam customers, but all over the place. And this survey was based off of 54 questions, and it starts to lay out where they sit on a maturity model. And this maturity model itself is built off of 3 core pillars. You got strategy, because guess what? If you're not leveraging strategy, what are you doing? Throwing darts at the wall, hoping something sticks. Eyes closed, just throw. Oh, I hit Darren, my bad. But it's that whole concept. You need to have a strategy defined. Then we look at people and process. Because you can have all the strategy in the world defined, but if you don't have the skill sets to do that, and the organizational buy-in, and the playbooks, why do pilots typically not crash? Anybody know? Because they use a checklist. They use it all the time. I use checklists. Even when I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to the grocery store, my wife gave me all this stuff, I need to pick it up. I don't want to be calling her every 5 minutes, so I'll grab my notes and put it down, and I look like a superstar because I actually came back with what she asked for. Because I wasn't going to remember it. But that's that whole point. People and process. Last, technology. And again, it goes down to the tool set you have and the tool set you will need into the future to meet the strategy, align with the people and process, and then that's defined in what we call subdimensions of technology, whether that's backup, recovery, reporting, dare I say it, AI, automation, orchestration, even that freedom and portability of data.
This is just to interrupt because I know you're going into them now. This was, to me, really exciting for the biggest thing I get asked by clients all the time is, what's best practice? How do I do this? What's the industry doing? Well, it's hard to say what the industry is doing. Everybody has a different, everybody has business objectives that are different. The business defines that, but if you could get a collection and understand across the board what everybody's doing, it makes it a lot easier to define where you're at and how you strive to be better. And to me, this is the beauty of this maturity matrix.
Well, and the maturity matrix is broken out in 4 horizons. So after you go through the survey, kind of baseline across your industry verticals, then it tells you where you sit on this actual horizon. And this is where we're going to get into some stories about this. But the first horizon and the basics of it, and I'd say maybe this was great 10 years ago, but it's having manual backups, as an example. Nothing's really scheduled, nothing's really defined. Then you start to look at that unclear resiliency strategy. I've been a Veeam customer for about 17, 18 years. It's a 19-year-old company. The reason I purchased Veeam 17 or 18 years ago was to cover my own behind. I was the IT folk. I had to make sure that I could restore my data should the bad things happen. But that's changed. Now we need organizational support and driving it down from the highest of the C-suite. Recovery plans equal theory. There's no plans. It's just, oh, I need to restore because, you know, Derran deleted his Excel document and needs it back.
Again.
That's no longer that same type of thing. Even reactive security and on-clear accountability. Now, Derran, I know you have some stories with this.
Yeah, so these are Canadian-wide stories, but we have one, we call it, it's an education, and all these are learning opportunities, right? So we had one education institute where the actual college's student portal was ransomware. And if you think of what that means student can't submit, professors don't know if they submitted their assignments, and they certainly can't grade their assignments. Everything went down to a standstill. They tried to do some backup or recovery. They looked at the backups and they were very much, one day they worked, one day they didn't work, corruption in the data, nobody was managing them, nobody was understanding really what was going on. And having backups isn't a strategy, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time in data protection is that every company you talk to can do a backup. It comes down to when you need to recover, or it comes down that it's important. The other big one was, and Rick almost, I got a chuckle out when he asked at the beginning, was the story about a manufacturing plant that had that DR plan, right? They had the DR plan. Hey, I got the plan, we're good. And then one day they got hit with ransomware. Nobody could place orders, nothing could, manufacturing didn't know what to do, they didn't know what to produce, nothing, complete standstill. And they're like, we got out the plan and nobody knew what to do with the plan. Nobody had ever practiced the plan, nobody ever implemented the plan. The technology people, I don't even think had ever seen the plan. So it was a complete disconnect and it was a complete nightmare, and they quickly realized that if you don't if you don't actually practice or practice your plan, your idea of resiliency or recovery is based in fantasy, right? You need to bring it down to reality. We need to know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, so basically what you called out there, to even summarize it to everything, they had technology.
They definitely had technology, and they had a DR, but there was a complete disconnect between the two.
Yeah,
Nothing been
so no
practiced.
people process,
No people process.
no strategy at the highest level, just it was a purchase plan that nobody knew
Well,
what
it
to
was
do
really
with.
good for the whoever the individual owned that plan. When he was challenged by senior management or CEOs and et cetera, he's like, I got the plan, don't worry, we're good. But I often talk about is that it's great to say that, but how do you actually prove it? How can you actually prove that? Somebody comes to you today and says, can you prove that our backups are running all the time, and when we need to do a restore, it's going to work? How do you prove that? You're not going in and pulling off a little log and giving them little logs, right? A screenshot. You need actual some kind of
GRC would love that. What are you talking
I
about?
know, it's great. But you need it more based in reality, and you need to know when the chips are down, that what you have for backups is going to work. What you have for a plan is based in reality, and it's going to work.
Okay, so that was 44% sitting in Horizon 1. Now we shift into Horizon 2. That's 30% of organizations, and when you start to look at that, that means they at least have some RTO and RPO targets. At least something's written somewhere, okay? We're moving up. We're looking a bit good. Immutability, scattered, for some of it. There's a check mark once in a while to say, hey, I have immutable backups. On top of that, there's a little bit of retention policies. They're looking good, man. Horizon 2 is looking pretty solid. There's some security monitoring capabilities.
That's good.
So a pop-up comes up once in a while and says, hey, it's there. You got a problem. What do you do with it? Broader coverage. So they're starting to make sure they're capturing everything in their scope. A little further, instead of just the IT folk trying to make sure they got their coverage should they get the help desk ticket that something's been lost. And there's some ransomware simulations. Now, I know you've been dealing with some of these customers in that 30% range. What's that look like?
It's funny, this is coming out of that transition, right? You're out of that basement, if you will. You're now moving up, and you start to see a mod podge. I don't know what the right term is there.
You're making up words like me now too?
Terms,
Good,
apparently.
good.
But one of them we saw was in a healthcare institute got hit with ransomware. They had immutable backups. They had actually done tabletops, etc. They had done a lot of this, and when they actually got hit, they were able to recover. Took a little time, but they were able to recover. But what they missed which Rick is alluding to, is the fact that in that hour as they were down, they got back on running, then they found out that their data had been exfiltrated. So now they have thousands of records, patient records on the internet, and they're being blackmailed for that. So while their plan really did work in some regard, as far as they were able to, maybe it wasn't obviously in the next tier where you get orchestrated, they were able to do manual process, they were able to get back up and running, they had a mutable backup, but they missed the learning for that whole exfiltration completely. Another one was actually on the retail side. We found this interesting, and there's been a few of these retail ones in Canada, if you think back the last 2 or 3 years. And it was a Black Friday sale. They got hit with ransomware. I mean, the bad guys are always good, right? They hit you when it counts. It's on a ransomware. How many times I know of businesses being tapped on Christmas Eve? It's considerable. So they got hit. They had put a lot of time and money into testing and making sure that they were ready, and they were able to recover within about an hour or two, and their stores back up running. You know what they missed? The online part. There was a complete disconnect. The stores were all up and running, but their online purchases sat at zero. Nobody could get anything through the stores. It was a complete misalignment in the organization where they were taking care and they focused on the on-prem. They did a good job. They missed the whole other aspect of what's in the cloud and their online portion. And ultimately, what makes them more money is the online side. So they had a really bad day.
Yeah, somebody had to pay the piper on that one.
Yeah, and we've seen this, especially in retail, like it broke my heart about 3 years ago. I used to talk about this all the time, what happened to Chapters, right? Chapters was pretty much a exact scenario. They got back up and running, but they were running in on-prem only, nothing in the cloud worked. Then it was a subset because they couldn't get their data, and then it took them almost, I think, 84 days to get back.
I don't want to look at this as all doom and gloom either. I mean, that's a great time to go to your C-level and ask for some money for that new tooling, right?
It's unfortunate that that's the time when they open up the coffers, if you will, but yeah, those are good times. And again, a lot of times when something like this happens, you're gonna see everybody say, we need, you know what, we need the better tool, we need the better security tool, we need the better EDR, the better firewall. What it really comes down to is, hey, those are important, and if those gaps need to be filled, totally get it. But let's make sure we turn that dial. We're talking about cyber resiliency now. So let's make sure that we really assess what really happened, how it got in, and what we get the best bang for a buck when we spend money. Maybe it is on improving our EDR or firewall, but maybe it's making sure that we have a resilient plan at the data recovery across on-prem, across the cloud, etc.
Nice. All right, time to shift gears. So where's that sitting us at? 74% of organizations are sitting in that horizon 1 and 2. Is that good enough? You all think that's good enough? No, okay, I'm just making sure. So let's shift into horizon 3. That's mature and adaptive. We're getting there, right? It's not like when we were 12 out running around. We're starting to mature. We got some experience. We're building it out. We're learning from our life experiences. So inside of here, when you start to look at what mature and adaptive really means, now you have organizational-wide resilient strategy at least defined. You got buy-in from the organization. We're sitting good. We got complete unified workload coverage. Because I'm sure if I'd ask anybody in this room, if you have a full document that categorizes every single tier of your application stack, you may, but has that been bought in by the organization? And is it forgetting about that one server, that one application, that means employees get paid, or it means the most important thing for an organization, but it was never captured because you never really knew that entire workflow that occurs. It could even be a print spooler, right? That could be an important concept of that unified broad coverage. Keeping multiple copies of your data, extremely good. Making sure one's off-site, making sure it's spread across different mediums, making sure that it's immutable, and hopefully that it can be recovered, meaning you've tested it for 0 errors. Because if you're storing all those recoveries, now those backups, and you try to recover them and it fails, that's also not a great day. And looking across cross-system. I'm sure we've all dealt with it. Everybody's looked across multiple different platforms today, whether it was due to cost factor and having to move from one hypervisor to another or one hyperscaler to the next. Can you go across that entire platform? And when we start to look at organizations inside of this, they do have that flexibility built in. Integrated security, meaning it hits a SOC. It's not just a security alert that's sitting within an isolated portal. It's going into your entire security operations center with real-time detection, leveraging tested incident response playbooks. Keyword, tested. People learn to do things that they do a lot. Like they say, to become an expert in something, you spend 10,000 hours, and then you can at least quantify yourself as that. But that's a lot of time, repetition, so on and so forth. I don't know if anybody's seen the mental health session yesterday, but I was there and my son was there, and he's an esports player. He's put 14,000 hours into that game. 14,000 hours, and he's 24. Just do the math on that. That is an expert in that field because he spent so much time, but not just playing the game, becoming good at the game, learning it, finding the ways to be a little bit better. And that's exactly what this is. But Derran, what do you got here?
Before we talk about the use cases, I love one thing in here, and it's important to me, that advanced orchestration, automated recovery. So typically, this is across maturity, across a number of different manufacturers we brought in, et cetera. So I look at the orchestration from two different perspectives. I look at it from the security side and from the data protection side, which is, again, that whole data resiliency, right? So I often get asked, and about 3 years ago at BSides, I actually did a presentation on the best product you could buy for security today is not buying a product, just having all your products talk to each other. So the orchestrator, right? You want to get the most bang for your buck and have more efficiency, have the firewall say something to your EDR when it says something in like the 4 seconds versus waiting for a manual person to come in and see something and go mad on manual rule. Orchestration is really important. One of the examples we saw that really fit into this mature and adaptive quadrant was a bank. There was a bank that got hit. They took them about 2 to 3 hours to completely recover. They had immutable backups. I went over the line, I'm sorry. Sorry, camera. Immutable backups. They had orchestration, so it was pushing a button. Everything was starting to be grabbed from that immutable backups. Immutable backups mean the bad guys could not delete any of it, and they started to recover. Technology win, right? The backup and running in 2 or 3 hours. What they missed, part of this whole plan, was the fact that for that 2 to 3 hours, nobody was contacting or giving updates to the public or to clients. So technology win, trust lost, because that 2 to 3 hours, nobody knew what was going on. It hit the news. It was a big thing. Instead of them getting out in front of it from a communication perspective, it turned into a complete PR nightmare for them when it should have been more of a win. So again, it's such a simple thing. The communication plan was missing in that part of it, but it was an important one. Another one was public organization, and similar to what we talked about earlier, that did a really good job on protecting their on-prem, but they missed the total cloud side. They missed the cloud side. They had been doing, they were quite mature, they were doing testing and all this, but we realized after the fact they were doing siloed. They were doing siloed. They had a group that was doing all this and a group that doing this, but then you know what? That cloud group really wasn't doing anything. They were completely missed. So while the organization, for the most part, had orchestration, had all this stuff down, it wasn't across the whole organization. They were very siloed, and it was felt when the cloud services did come out. And this was a public sector organization where people depended on getting access to data that they needed every day for their lives. So it was a big deal, and it took 2 to 3 weeks to get the cloud part back up running. So total win on the on-prem side, the siloed nature of their planning and testing, and what they had implemented meant that it wasn't a win for the organization.
So I like that. I mean, moving into Horizon 3, there's more wins than losses, and they don't have much more to get themselves up to that.
Oh, I think I'll figure something out.
Okay.
You challenge me, I like it.
Yeah, I like it. So then 8% are sitting in self-optimizing. This is when all the pieces come together. You're leveraging strategy. You've got the people and process. You have all the technology that's required, even from fully automated, continuously tested backups. Keyword, fully automated, like Derran was talking about. I'm not going to read through all these different things, but even leveraging zero trust principles by default, isolation, least privilege, list goes on and on. Derran, what do you got around there? This should look better, right?
This should look a lot better. There was a global shipping company that got hit by ransomware. They had total automation, they had immutable storage, they had everything. And you know what appeared on the news? Absolutely nothing. You didn't hear about it. We hear about some stuff because we get the inside stories from different companies. But they were fully at that self-optimizing, they had a full plan, they were checking their plan and practicing in an automated way that every day they got those reports. Every day in the morning, they got a report at 7 o'clock saying, we tested these 100 systems at night when their hypervisors were a little quieter. They had all those reports. When something happened, they clicked the button, the orchestration kicked in, and they were back up and running. Nobody knew that it happened. And you know what? Those are far and few between, but they are happening. People are moving up this matrix. And that's why I like the matrix. It's like, as Rick said, it's a checklist. You can see where you are. It doesn't matter if you're at the bottom. The point is that if you're on the very bottom and maybe there's 7 things there, maybe you're doing 4 or 5 of them and you need to do the 2 more and you get to the next. The point is that we always want to be progressing and improving. Another one that got flagged in this that really hit home on the self-optimizing was there was a major energy company in Canada got hit about 3 or 4 years ago, and they were raked over the coals by the regulators. They took that feedback, fines, etc. They came up with a detailed plan, and they redid everything from the ground up from their DR, disaster recovery, and they got hit again. And nobody knew they got hit the second time. And regulators, they did have to report that to the regulators, of course, but the regulators came back and said, you know what a difference between 2 different things. You had to disclose it, but nothing was lost. There was no stealing of data. There was no corruption, no loss of data.
Yeah.
This was a complete, it shows what happens is that it's unfortunate that we get hit like that, but at least they learned from it and they went and they put the necessary funding into improve that process and what they had for technology.
Plus the big thing you called out there. It's going to happen. It's a given. We used to know servers will fail, whether it was a RAID card, whether it was corruption on a data store, whatever your array is. It's going to happen. But how do we come back from it? The same thing as we all know now, you're going to get hit by something. It's going to happen. But how do we rebound from that? And this is where we start to break out these horizons. And when we start to look at horizon 1 and 2, it's not good enough. 74% of organizations, so 3 out of 4 organizations are still sitting there, based off of our survey of 500 organizations, of course. I'm not saying in this room it's 3 out of 4, but maybe it is. Not asking anybody to put up their hands. I'm just saying,
I think
think
this
about it
represents
yourself.
what my client base is, and
Yeah.
I cover Edmonton and Manitoba. I would say that this is primary, 75% typical clients are in those bottom 2.
Yeah.
And then there's somebody, the 25% is really, most of them are in that mature adaptive, and maybe they got a couple points into the top. They're striving, they're pushing to get up to that self-optimizing.
Nice, and that's what this framework's all about. It's not the whole fact of, oh, it's terrible. It's not terrible. It's what we do as humans. We adapt, we evolve, we learn from our experiences. We all fail. I might have failed 12 times today already, but I learned from it. So I'm not totally stupid, I'm just dumb.
Put your
I'm
pants on
actually,
this time.
I did,
Yeah.
which was good.
was a good
I
start.
didn't know I was gonna be on camera, because that could have been awkward. And I've stayed in the box the
I don't wanna see
entire
that
time.
again.
But that's that whole thing, and here's the framework. And this is about the enterprise data resiliency. iChart, I'm sure you can read this later, but it isn't about the pointing the fingers. It's not what this is about. It's about the opportunity moving up the curve means we go from weeks of outages to predictable recovery in hours. In some cases, of course, if you really get hit by something, am I going to sit here and be like, oh, if you purchase Veeam today, we can recover anything in minutes? There's a bigger process that happens. You don't know if your data center has become a crime scene. Do you have the data center? Hopefully, that strategy's been defined. Do you have the ability to restore to the secondary data center? Again, the strategy, but also the skill set, the people, the process. And if you do everything right, you can move that down from weeks to hopefully hours, because guess what? It didn't get into your entire infrastructure. Don't assume it's a wipeout issue. It's an isolated segment that you've stopped, contained, eradicated, and now you can recover. Only a part of the organization was taken down, not the entire organization.
I think people also, and this is something I learned about 3 or 4 months ago, I didn't realize, is that if you do get hit by ransomware and you're not able to get all the data back, but you're moving on, the regulator or whoever you're using for insurance or anything like that, they're gonna require that you keep that encrypted data somewhere. So if you had 100 terabytes that's encrypted and you've moved on, they're gonna require you to put that 100 terabytes somewhere. So that eventually, in a year from now or 2 years from now, if that key is found, is known, that you're gonna be able to get your data back. So a lot of organizations get caught off guard where they don't realize, I gotta build a new environment, I'm quarantined off but I also need that new environment, but I need another environment to keep a copy of that encrypted data.
You're out of the box. Get back in.
Sorry.
And globally, the amount it's costing us for each data breach is steadily climbing. It's $6.5 million Canadian today, right? And that all comes down into, it's not even about the cost, it's the amount of time we're still having to take to detect, analyze it, contain it. Sometimes it's still sitting in your environment for almost a year before you even find it. That's a challenge, because if I was to sit in any of your environments for a year, I'm going to get a lot of information, even if I'm not using tools. I can gather a lot of details in a small amount of time. If they're sitting there that long, they might know your environment better than you do. That's a challenge, right? That's what I use GPS for today, because I'll get lost going around in circles in the parkade. It doesn't help with parkades, actually. I wish it did. So I didn't realize I was just going around in circles. I didn't do it yesterday.
Trying to get out of the big parkade here, I can just look it on my GPS and just see it driving around and around and around.
We haven't talked about Veeam much, so I guess I should do a little bit of a vendor spiel. And that's what I'll leave that screen there for. It is that whole thing, what it actually looks like. And again, this isn't even much of a Veeam pitch, but these are those core 5 things you need to think about from your technology provider. Can they provide data backup? If they can't, you shouldn't even talk to them, because that's table stakes. But do they have data recovery? And what does that mean? Yeah, you can restore to, that one spot, but do you have data portability? Can you restore to a different location, a different hypervisor, a different hyperscaler, dissimilar hardware? The list goes on and on, but what can you do with that data? It's not as simple, and I've heard people ask, like, what's recovery look like with Veeam? I'm like, that's a detailed question, because where are we recovering it to? What do you need it for? Do you need a file? Do you need a disk? Do you need that entire workload back up and functioning in the organization? Then data security, key core pillar for us is that whole fact integrating into your SOC, immutability, encryption, based off of STIGs and our software appliances that are hardened to the point that if you lose access to it, you're not going to get access back, right? I know that sounds bad, but it is a fact, because you need to keep the documents in play, and then applying data intelligence into it. And Derran, over to you for this.
Yeah, Rick made a point earlier that this isn't really is about marketing, right? It's not about marketing. Everything that is part of the maturity matrix that we've shown here maps back to NIST. And as you know, NIST is one of those fundamental compliance frameworks that a lot of other frameworks at least map to, right? So everything in there maps back to NIST, and then will map to your other framework. That's how this was all developed.
Now, I'm not going to make you go through this entire eye chart. This is probably something you can send out if you want to, but there's a lot of stuff there and how it directly aligns to the NIST CSF with specific features, functions that we offer within the solution. But I don't think we really have time to go through that today. Unless you just want to read off everything in
No,
slow
I
monotone voice.
think you said it well enough, and there's also, there's lots of different ways to map a lot of these, on the NIST to different frameworks. I know I saw Safe here a little couple minutes ago, who works for Secured Approach. He's actually come up with a way to map everything together as well on a program. So there's lots of different ways, locally, externally, that you can look at mapping, feature functionality and other compliance to, NIST and other frameworks.
Awesome, thank you. So really, we want to take a shift. We don't want the binder to be dusty. It doesn't even have to be a binder, but it is that whole fact that it's got to be used every single day. It has to be updated, it has to be reflected. The majority of that can also be automated. Let's be honest, it doesn't have to be a static document that you physically fill out yourself. You have the tools. Dare I say even an AI, Copilot, whatever it is to help do some of those things, and look for a provider that can help tie all those different pieces together. Because if your plan only lives on paper, what makes you think your recovery will live in reality? Right? It's a story. It's not true. Make sure you live and breathe it every single day.
It's a living document.
And on that point, anything you take from this session or any questions? We've got a couple of minutes, I do believe.